Hello, I'm Ms. Hutchinson, the owner of Birds Books, an independent bookstore in Connecticut, and I am honored to be the host of Write America. The aim of this series is to help set the country back on a correct, productive course of freedom, justice, equality, and plain human kindness. Write America is a literary series created by author Roger Rosenblatt, featuring award-winning and nationally renowned authors and new and emerging writers in readings and conversations each week about how books and art might bridge the deep divisions in our nation. Write America celebrates the quiet power of art in our lives, the unifying power of the highest uses of language. In novels, stories, essays, and poems, we recognize one another as parts of the human family, one family. Roger Rosenblatt, the creator of Write America, puts it this way: writing makes justice desirable, evil intelligible, grief endurable, and love possible. So welcome, and please join us every Monday evening at this time as many of the most beloved and distinguished writers in the country read from their work and talk to each other and with you in an effort to bring us together. If you missed last week's episode with Paul Muldoon, Paisley Rekdal, and Shane McRae, or any of the previous episodes of Write America, you can go to Birds Books Crowdcast channel and watch the recordings at any time. Tonight's episode is also being recorded, so if you missed something, you can go back and rewatch or share it with your friends. Tonight, Birds Books hosts a reading by and conversation with Russell Banks and Ishmael Angaluuk Hope. I will return after the readings and discussion to bring your questions and comments to the authors. For those of you unfamiliar with Crowdcast, I will give you a quick tour. To the right of your screen, there's the chat, and you can make all the comments you like as we move through the evening. But if you have a question, go to the bottom of your screen and you'll see Ask a Question, and that's where I will go at the end of the author's discussion and look for your questions to ask the authors. The third thing, at the bottom, it says Buy Authors Signed Books from Birds Books. We do carry signed books from Write America. Ishmael's book is in a reprint, so we will have it as soon as it is reprinted, and rest assured we will have signed copies. Now, a little about our first speaker. Russell Banks is a prolific writer of fiction and has a new novel titled Foregone, published of March of this year. His earlier novels, Affliction and The Sweet Hereafter, were adapted into feature films which received widespread critical acclaim. Included among the numerous honors and awards Russell Banks has received are the Ingram Merrill Award, the John Dos Passos Award, the Literature Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the Laurel Baston Prize for Best Work of Fiction Translated into French for the French editing of The Darling. His titles, Continental Drift and Cloud Splitter, were Pulitzer Prize finalists. Affliction, Cloud Splitter, and Lost Memory of Skin were PEN/Faulkner finalists. Lost Memory of Skin was a finalist for the inaugural Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction. Banks was the New York State Author 2004-2008. He has been awarded honorary doctorates from 7 colleges and universities. He is the winner of the 2011 Commonwealth Award for Literature. In 2011, the French Minister of Culture awarded Mr. Banks the rank of Officier des Arts et Lettres. In 2014, he was inducted into the New York State Writers Hall of Fame. He lives in upstate New York, Miami, Florida. Please welcome to the screen, Russell Banks. Well, here you are magically. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, and it's lovely to be here around, I think. I'm going to read a very short story. I think it's very difficult to read from novels. Excerpting a piece from a 300 or 400-page manuscript is really difficult for the writer, difficult for the reader, difficult for the listener. So better to read a very short story. And this one is called The Outer Banks. No necessary connection to the last name of the author. The Outer Banks. Ed pulled the RV off the road and parked it in a small paved lot, the front bumper kissing the concrete barrier, the large pale gray vehicle facing the sea. And Alice said, "Why are we stopping?" The rain came in curtains off the Atlantic, one after the other, like the waves breaking against the sand, only slower, neither building nor diminishing. The couple watched the rain and the waves through the wide, flat windshield. There were no other vehicles in the lot and none in sight on the coastline road behind them. It was late fall and the summer houses and rental cottages and motels were closed for the season. I don't know why. I mean, I do know. Because of the dog. He cracked open his window and relighted the cold stub of his cigar, and for a long while the couple sat in silence. Finally, she said, "So these are the famous Outer Banks of North Carolina." "Yeah. Sorry about the weather," he said. "Graveyard of the Atlantic, Alice." "Yes, I know." "Joke, Alice? Joke?" She didn't answer him. A moment passed and he said, "We've got to do something about the dog. You know that." "What have you got in mind? Bury her in the sand?" "That's a real cute idea, Ed. Bury her in the sand and drive on our merry way just like that." She looked at her hands for a moment. "I don't like thinking about it either, you know." He eased himself from the driver's chair, stood uncertainly, and walked back through the living area and the tidy gallery to the closet-sized bathroom, where he got down carefully on his knees and drew back the shower curtain and looked at the body of their dog. She was a black and white mixed breed, lab Springer, lying on her side where Ed had found her this morning when, naked, he'd gone to take a shower. He studied the dog's stiffened muzzle. "Poor bastard," he said. "Maybe we should try to find a vet," she called from the front. "She's dead, Alice," he hollered. "They'll know how to take care of her." Ed stood up. He was 72. The simple things had gotten very difficult very quickly. Standing up, sitting down, getting out of bed, driving for longer than 4 or 5 hours. When they left home barely a year ago, none of those things had been difficult for him. That was why he had done it, left home. Why they both had done it. Because while nothing simple was especially difficult for them, they were old enough to know that whatever they did not do or see now, they would never do or see at all. It was Alice's idea too, not his alone, the romance of the open road. See America and die, master of your destiny, all that. Although the actual plan had been his to sell the house in Troy and all their furniture, buy and outfit the RV, map and follow the interstate from upstate New York to Disney World, to the Grand Canyon, to Yosemite, to the Black Hills. Man, he always wanted to see the Black Hills of South Dakota. And Mount Rushmore was even grander and more inspirational than he'd hoped. Then on to Graceland, and now the Outer Banks. He hadn't once missed the hardware store, and she hadn't missed the bank. They'd looked forward to retirement. And once there, had liked it, as if it were a vacation spot, and they decided to stay year-round. There were no children or grandchildren or other close family. They were free as birds. Snowbirds, they'd been called in Florida and out in Arizona. When they left home, their dog, Rosie, was already old, 10 or 11. He wasn't sure they'd got her from the pound, but Jesus, he hadn't figured on her dying like this. It was as if she had run out of air, out of life, like a watch that had stopped. He dropped his cigar butt into the toilet, looked at it for a second, and resisted flushing. She'd scowl when she saw it, he knew, because it was ugly. Even he thought so. But he shouldn't waste the water. And walked heavily back to the front. And the vets are for sick animals, not dead animals, he said to her. I suppose you want to leave her in a dumpster or just drop her at the side of the road somewhere. We should have found a home for Rosie. When we left Troy, I mean, should have given her to some people or something, you know? He looked at his wife as if for a solution. She was crying, though, silently, with tears streaming down her pale cheeks. She cried steadily, as if she had been crying for a long time and had no idea how to stop. He put a hand on her shoulder. Alice, hey, come on, don't cry. Jesus, it's not the end of the world, Alice. She stopped and fumbled in the glove compartment for a tissue, found one, and wiped her face. I know, but what are we going to do? About what? Oh, Ed, about Rosie. This, she said, and waved a hand at the rain and the sea. Everything. It's my fault, he said. He stared at her profile, hoping she would turn to him and say, no, it wasn't his fault. It wasn't anybody's. But she didn't turn to him. She said nothing. Slowly, he rose from his seat again. He walked to the bathroom and pulled back the shower curtain. He kneeled down and gently lifted the dog in his arms, surprised that she was not heavier. Lying there, she had seemed solid and heavy, as if carved of wood and painted like an old, unused merry-go-round horse. He carried the dog to the side door of the RV and worked it open with his knee and stepped down to the pavement. The rain fell on him, and he was quickly drenched. He wore only a short-sleeved shirt and Bermuda shorts and sneakers, and all of a sudden he was cold. He carried the dog to the far corner of the parking lot, stepped over the barrier between the pavement and the beach, and walked with slow, careful steps through the wet sand toward the water. The rain blocked his vision and plastered white swatches of his hair to his skull and his thin clothes to his body. Halfway between the parking lot and the water, he stopped and set the dog down. He was breathing rapidly from the effort. He wiped the rain from his eyes, got down on his hands and knees, and started scooping sand. He pulled double handfuls of it away, worked down through the wet gray sand to the dry sand beneath, and kept digging until finally he had carved a large hole. Still on his knees, he reached across the hole and drew the body of the dog into it. Her hair was wet and smelled the way it had when she was still alive. Then slowly, carefully, he covered her. When he finished, there was a low mound where before there had been a hole. He turned around and looked back at the RV in the parking lot. He could see his wife staring out the windshield from the passenger seat. He couldn't tell if she was looking at him or at the sea or what. He turned his gaze toward the sea. The rain was still coming steadily in curtains, one after the other. He stood and brushed the crumbs of wet sand from his clothes, bare legs, and hands, and made his way back to the parking lot. When he had settled himself into the driver's chair, he said to his wife, "That's the end of it. I don't want to hear any more about it, okay?" He turned the ignition key and started the motor. The windshield wipers swept back and forth like wands. "Okay," she said. He backed the RV around and headed toward the road. "You hungry?" he asked her. She spoke slowly as if to herself. "There's supposed to be a good seafood place a few miles south of here. It's toward Kitty Hawk, so that's good." He put the RV into gear and pulled out of the lot onto the road south. "Fine," he said. "Too bad we have to see Kitty Hawk in the rain, though. I was looking forward to seeing it. I mean, the Wright brothers and all." "She said. cumbersome vehicles splashed along the straight two-lane highway and no cars passed. Everyone seemed to be inside today, staying home. Keep going and head for Cape Canaveral. Check out the Space Center and all. Shut the space program down, I thought. I guess maybe they did. End of story.
Thank you, Russell. Just to let you know, we are losing your video once in a while. It does skip in and out, but we did hear the audio for the entire.
You heard the audio, okay.
Thank you so much, really. Our next speaker is Ishmael Angaluuk Hope. Click it. Inupiaq is an Alaskan native poet and writer of genres such as video games and film. He is also a scholar of Native American oral literature and art. He is a learner and speaker of Tlingit language. He belongs to the Tlingit Inupiaq tribes. He takes pride in aspects of his heritage as well, such as German and Welsh ancestry. The family remembered his great-grandfather, Percy Hope, as an English gold prospector, but with a little research into names, he found that Percy was likely to have been Welsh. Ishmael published 2 books of poetry with Ishmael Reed Publishing Company, Courtesans of Flower Hill and Rock Piles Along the Eddy. Upcoming projects include a collection of Tlingit stories by storyteller Robert Zupoff Shaddocks and a modern speculative fiction epic written in Tlingit with a facing English translation. A reminder, when the books come back into print, we will get them in the store. Please welcome to the screen Ishmael Angaluuk Hope. Let me bring you up.
All right.
Welcome.
Thanks so much, Alice. Can you hear me okay? I hope you can. We checked this earlier. Beautiful reading. Thanks to Alice and Birds Books, Roger Rosenblatt, and everyone involved with Write America, all the beautiful writers, and that terrific reading from Russell Banks. I'm looking forward to the conversation we're going to have a little bit later. Just beautiful stuff, beautiful stuff. And so I'm going to read from my poetry books, the 2 poetry books that I have, Courtesans of Flower Hill and Rock Piles Along the Eddy, which, as Alice mentioned, Rock Piles Along the Eddy is receiving a second print, so I'll get those to Birds Books pretty soon. And I'll also read 1 or 2 poems from my newest collection, which I'm calling Story Lyric. So I'll just get right into it. I am sad with the recent passing of Robert Bly. He came to the University of Alaska Southeast here in Juneau, or the Tlingit name Zuntikahini, and he read, and the poems were beautiful. And so that's where I first learned about English renderings of the ghazal, Middle Eastern poetry genre. And I tried my hand out on at least Robert's version of how you would, maybe not even actually close to Robert's version, but more like 3 lines rather than 2 really long lines. But here is one that is in honor of Nora Downharrow, Keuchne, one of our elders, Tlingit elders. And she had passed recently in 2017. Her with Richard Downharrow were a power couple, editing books of Tlingit stories. And I was very close to them and loved them very much. Talking with Nora. Nora told me today that your life's a poem. There's no time for a rewrite. It doesn't do any good to crack open the book out of harm's way. I am walking the path of grief and longing without satisfaction in sight. I just grew tired of wearing my reptilian skin, so I stood up. There are many things to grieve over. 1,000 cry songs wait to be sung. It's okay. One crumb to the fire is a feast for the dead. Thank a person even when it's hard, she said. And now I know why halos could be seen on angels and young men could heat the ocean. Many voices now sing at the same time. Alive in the eddy is making his way home. The woman under the ice thaws her black hair. I was smiling after talking to Nora today. I can't help but think of the conference of the birds where Raven got in over his head. So that's Talking with Nora from my first collection of books, first collection of poetry. Richard used to say, when you do a reading, you do something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, something boo. And so that's what I'm doing. Something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. So that was my borrowed and old one. So I got that taken care of. And I'll read two from here. This is called Carrying Lewis at Bedtime. And Lewis is my son. I have 4 daughters and 1 son. And this was when Lewis was younger, and then he'd fall asleep somewhere in the house, and then I'd carry him to bed. The warm body of my son, as I slide my palms under his head and behind his knees, carry him down the hallway, his little ear pressed on my shoulder. He shakes, whimpers. I line our hearts up, let him find mine, a resting place, like lapping up chilly river water, sun's rays feeding tree moss on branches weighted by snow. I lay him down beside me. He curls up on the pillow. The warm body of my son, the warm body of my son. And this one is called, this is probably the poem I'm most recognized for. It's been anthologized a number of times, especially in two native anthologies. This is called Canoe Launching into the Gaslit Sea. Now, as much as ever, and as always, we need to band together, form a lost tribe, scatter as one, burst through rifle barrels, guided by the spider's crosshairs. We need to knit wool sweaters for our brother, sleeping under the freeway, hand him our wallets, and bathe his feet in holy water. We need to find our lost sister, last seen hitchhiking Highway 16, or panhandling on the streets of Anchorage, couch surfing with relatives in Victoria, or kicking out her boyfriend after a week of partying in a trailer park in Salem, Oregon. Now, as much as ever and as always, we need to register together, lock arms at the front lines, brand ourselves with mutant DNA strands, atomic whorls, and serial numbers, adding ourselves to the blacklist. We need to speak in code, languages the enemy can't break, slingshot garlic cloves and tortilla crumbs, wear armor of lily pads and sandstone, carved into the stately faces of bears and the faraway look of white-tailed deer. We need to run uphill with rickshaws, play frisbee with trash lids, hold up portraits of soldiers who never made it home, organize a peace-in on the walls of the Grand Canyon. We need to stage earnest satirical plays, hold debate contests with farm animals at midnight, fall asleep on hammocks hanging from busy traffic lights. Now, as much as ever, and as always, we need to prank call our senators, take selfies with the authorities at fundraisers we weren't invited to, kneel in prayer at burial grounds crumbling under dynamite. We need to rub salve on the belly of our hearts, meditate on fault lines as the earthquakes dance in robes with fringe that spits medicine, make love on the eve of the disaster. All right, all right, all right. That's nice to see the comments. I won't, I'll look at them later when I can. So this one is called We Will Emerge, and it was on a series that Wajahat Ali organized, and with an idea built on with Dave Eggers that they did for PEN America, asking writers and thinkers and celebrities around the nation to start with We Will Emerge and to end with We Will Emerge and find a better way, and write whatever they like in between. We will emerge and watch opera, host potlatches, complete rites for the dead, put on avant-garde exhibitions, stage happenings. We will give long hugs, sing karaoke after the night's reading, mingle romance with art, make bold statements and lots of babies. We will figure a way out of this, listen to elders, learn languages, reweave the symbiosis that webs the sliver of geology we briefly occupy. We will hold and hold and hold the rings of the oldest tree, the bear's den where the bear is sleeping and hearing everything, and the dreams that we came to be from what the land told us. We will emerge and find a better way. And I'd like to end with this last one. This is dedicated to Lily Lilenya Hope, Wushkindenda'at. And I wanted to, along with the lines of what the Right America is doing, responding to the times, believing in hope, bringing people together. I need this. I need these kind of kicks and connections, even when there's so much despair and, things like my community being so difficult. When this is over, for Lily Lilenya Hope, when this grief is over, I will breathe into a sunflower, organize the shells of mollusks, spark from within the physics of bipedal flight. When this plague dissipates, I will be the first in line with you to the dance that upholds the stars, for the butterfly chords spun into chaff and petals crying dew, curling over the horizon, footprints of the sun's perpetual fire. All righty. I look forward to this talk with Russell Banks.
Oh, that was lovely. Really, thank you, Ishmael, for reading those poems. And it was a great penetration into the world of now and the world of future. I think of this, I hope you don't mind my saying so, you've evoked a couple of people tonight, my generation and the one just beyond me, with Robert Bly, first of all, who was someone I knew back in the 60s and 70s and admired and learned from. And then also indirectly, but I managed to make the connection, Ishmael Reed, who is my contemporary, more or less. I think he's a couple years older than I am, but I think of him as my generation. He's someone since the 1960s, middle 60s, we first came to know each other, and here we are still now. We're still out there.
Right on.
Too, and I know also that I think he was the publisher of your mother's books as well, and that it's possible that you are named after him, in which case he's obviously a very significant person in your life, as he was and has been and continues to be in mine as well as a contemporary. But what I was touched by most in your poems, especially the last, is your vision of the future. I too have 4 daughters. I don't have a son. I have a grandson, thankfully. and understand. I hope you understand my view of the future and how depressing it can be at times, for me, and the men and women of my generation, as we see the collapse of the climate and the collapse of hope in so many ways. That's your other name. And so your poems to me are very uplifting, and that changed my vision from a distant and, to this point, nostalgic past, perhaps, and a depressing and present, to the past. Simply descend into darkness from here. So I thank you very much for those poems.
Right on. Yeah, beautiful stuff, Russell. The connection with Ishmael Reed. Yes, I was absolutely named after him, and he published my mother's book of poems. A Lagoon is in My Backyard by Sister Goodwin, and that was in 1984. And years and years later, and now my mom and both my mom and dad have passed. Of illnesses. They died before their time, really. But then there's always been this close connection with Ishmael and his family, and which I've appreciated, and I've loved the connection. And actually, I'll answer the Alice's one of Alice's questions before we get to it, since it's come up. The book I'm reading now, The Complete Muhammad Ali, by Ishmael Reed. I'm studying boxing right now because, I went through chronic pain. I went through a breakdown, a mental breakdown, a breakdown in so many relationships, and so that type of thing. But studying Ali and boxing and greatness, and how boxers change their body and how they think is a major inspiration for me. And who better than my own namesake, who wrote, probably one of the best books about Ali. And so I saw that he interviewed you, Russell.
That's right. I forgot that. He stuck a microphone in my face one night and said, "What do you think about Muhammad Ali?" I forgot entirely what I said.
Yeah. There's some good stuff about your.
It's a lovely connection. Yeah. If we stay in this, you stay in this business long enough, this business of a storyteller, trying to be a poet. Although I like the way I've seen a couple of comments of yours in interviews where you describe yourself as a storyteller, which is how I always try to describe myself as well, as a storyteller. I'm not a novelist. I'm not a fiction writer. I'm not an author. I'm a storyteller, and it kind of brings a larger community, and that's my role, and as a storyteller. I notice you've also identified yourself that way. I think that's very useful and important to keep in mind as you're coming along. It helps you. The ambitions you have for your work on the one hand, and the ambitions you might have for your career on the other hand, and not get them confused, because they are very distinct and different.
Yeah, when you talk about ambitions you have for you, sorry.
Go ahead. No, continue.
Just the ambitions for my work. It goes to what you had touched on in your previous comments about hope for the future, and having a sense of having a historical consciousness. I'd say that along the lines of what you're talking about. I need to read some of your books now. I'm listening to a lot of audiobooks, but but before this, I checked out an interview of yours, and from your reading here, that connection with that storytelling that you're also talking about, that I'm picking up a sense of craft that I connect with in storytelling. colloquialism and a way that people would think and talk that I think is dear. Like, or what, that's, I don't know if she was looking at me or out the window or what, that type of thing about how it's a universal thing. And but it's also a thing that people think is maybe only particular to themselves.
Yes.
But then when a writer writes it, you can feel, you can feel how universal it is. Oh, that thing that I experience, but then they put it actually into words. So that's the kind of stuff. And then your other stuff about just generally knowing how, from this interview with Ishmael Reed and that interview that I watched, and the comments you're just making of a historical consciousness about where, what capitalism has done to us, what being digitized has done to us, how people on the outskirts of society, which I'm kind of, I've experienced the people I'm around and kind of meet, being through a system, and being bludgeoned by a system in many ways. So I think both those, the attunement to the craft and also this sense of where we're at and how the writers and the poets will color life and give us insight into life that no one else can. Those are things I'm picking up right now on your, these conversations and getting familiarity with work right now.
He has finished reading a huge history. I read a lot of history. I'm sorry, I jumped in front of you there.
No,
I didn't catch the very end of what you're saying.
I was
our stream was unable to connect due to a network error. Okay, I'll keep talking for a minute more, and I hope that Ishmael, you can hear me. I don't know because I can't see your image. But what you're saying is terribly important, and I, especially as regards the role in the life of a writer, I just called The Birth of Everything, and if you can imagine from the title what it's trying to do. Anthropologists, archaeologists and anthropologists, and it doesn't ever enter into the type of human beings, even as it is standard described history of human beings on the planet. And I think that's what the artist does more than anyone else. That the artist, the visual artist, and so does the musical artist, gives us entry into the interior subjective life of individual human beings, and gives it at the same time, and thereby, I guess, dignity and respect, because it's worthy of entering in the first place. In most accounts, most narratives, that doesn't happen. This is what, to go back to what we were saying earlier, Ishmael, the storyteller does. The storyteller takes us into the interior life of the human being that is shared by the species, and gives it in that moment, in that way, the respect and the dignity, as you were doing in your poems, and as I was trying to do in that story of mine. I don't know if you're on line and hearing me or not, though, because my screen is blanked out on your side of it.
Can you hear me?
But maybe you can hear me. I don't know. Yes, I see a note that says you can hear me. That's good. I wish I could see you too. But anyhow, I can't hear you if you're speaking. And I don't really.
Can you hear me now?
Keep talking on to myself, which is a hard thing to do. or maybe it's too easy a thing to do.
Russell, can you hear?
To talk for a second, and something actually we mentioned the other day when we both had a moment to talk in the tech check part of this program about Ishmael Reed, who we began to speak about earlier, and how he is a figure in American literature whose presence from the beginning, from the middle 1960s or so, was so important and yet so overlooked at the same time. I think in 5-6 decades, finally, for his perspective on the world, on the American political history, American social life, and contemporary political history and literature, has finally come to a kind of presence that cannot be denied. I mean, I follow the work of so many young African American and writers of color, and I realized, where would their work be without this grandfather, Ishmael, laying out the territory back in the 1960s and continuing as a tiller in the field all these decades, as a publisher, as a creator of the Before Columbus Foundation, giving awards in very sharp distinction to the awards given out by the American Book Awards and by the National Book Awards and by the Pulitzers and so forth, making it clear that there was not a different or lesser literature, but a powerfully viable literature being written that was, for the most part, until very, very recently, overlooked. And you know, he is, more than any other single individual I know of, responsible for bringing us to a kind of bringing the world of publishing, the world of prize giving, the world of awards, and a world of respect, to awareness of the true nature of American literature as a syncretic literature, as something that is brought up and created the same way jazz has been created. And I think we've got to find ways to be truly grateful to him and express that gratitude. And I try every now and then to find a way to, let's name him something that acknowledges the work he has done and how he's sustained it over these many, many years.
Great suggestion. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, man. And the time is flying by, and I'm not sure where I should go from here.
I can hear Russell. Can you hear me?
Ishmael, and I can't hear Alice, and I can only address this screen on my own alone, which is not something I'm particularly good at. So I hope Alice can intervene somehow, or maybe I should just go off and come back.
That's exactly what you should do, Russell, is sign out and sign back in, because it'll fix it. Can you read the chat?
Back.
Because Ishmael and I can talk for a few minutes while you sign out and sign back in.
Sure. Can you hear me, Alice?
Out. I hope he comes back in, gets a chance, because I think it'll refresh his technology. Because he's basically talking blind, and I feel so badly for him because his bandwidth obviously is compromised for some reason, because the tech test was just fine. I'm going to ask you a question that I would have waited for Russell, and when he comes back, we can ask him, what book have you read that you wish you had written? I am a bookseller, so I am going to ask booky questions because that's just the way I am. So I'm shameless that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one.
It's a
I'll
tough
go
one, but it's not
to-
homework. So if you don't want to answer it, it's okay.
No worries. I like it. I like it a lot. I'd go to. I'd probably suggest Percival by Chrétien de Troyes. So we're going way back. We're going to the
I remember that.
Arthurian literature. Yeah, I think Percival. That's the one Percival's the one I just listened to through audiobook, which is terrific. And being a storyteller, I can discern its structure. They use what Albert Lord, the Harvard literary theorist, would call oral formula and theme. So oral formula is like Homer's The Wine Dark Sea, and it's throughout, that beautiful poem. So it's very, very oral. It's like Chrétien de Troyes was an actual troubadour poet, an oral storyteller and singer. And so I would go with that, because if I had that mind to be able to express the great oral epics, you really need the training for that. Maybe one of the last very, very greatest of the oral epic poets was Avdol Medvedevich, who was a South Slavic epic poet. He was called the Bosnian Homer, and so that's the kind of thing. If I had that ability, it's combining both the talent, but also with like many years of apprenticeship, of exposure to the tradition. And being a part of Native American oral literature, I can feel and know myself what it takes to absorb a tradition, and the kind of artist and kind of talent and intellect you need to have in order to really do it, like someone like Chrétien de Troyes.
Well, it's clearly a different era of time. And do you feel that is it the structure or the content that influences your work? Because it's clearly influenced your thinking.
I've been getting really, really into epic poetry, and part of it is, as I made like a big note in my bio, my love of finding out that I'm likely Welsh. We talked about my great grandfather being English. He was a gold prospector, Percy Hope. But notice that connection to Percival. That's where it came from. And Hope is a Gaelic name. There's actually a Hope clan in Scotland. So they were the ones who originated, a lot of the courtly tradition and concepts of knighthood. And even if we look at that, we look at European cultures as sort of colonial. You look at the Gaelic tribes, the Gaelic peoples, and they were fighting against, the imperialists, and they were indigenous. Welsh is an indigenous language. And so going way back to Homer and the great indigenous oral epic poets, I connect that so closely to the Native American stories that I know.
Russell, you're back.
I'm back. I guess I don't know. I nattered on there for about 15 minutes, and I didn't know if I was heard or not heard or seen.
And everything,
we did hear you.
Came through clearly. It was great. So while you were rebooting your life over here, I asked Ishmael, what book have you read that you wish you had written? And so we were talking about Percival. And
I heard that. I think that's brilliant and wonderful ambition and beautiful thoughts that Ishmael has about his enterprise and his work and his imagined.
You're still tiling a little bit, but do you have any thoughts on that subject, Russell?
As a writer, as a storyteller. Yeah, the book I wish I had written is Herman Melville's The Confidence Man. I think it's a book for our time, our moment, more than any other, and it dramatizes it the most succinct. It's a very short Melville book. It's only about 150 pages long.
Really?
It's a great portrait of the ultimate American, Euro-American type, the confidence man, the con man. And we have just now spent 4 years, and we continue to spend time living with the ultimate confidence man in our political life, and the psychology behind it, and the mythology behind the appearance of that figure, because he's a satanic figure in the Melvillian novel, and he's a satanic figure in our culture, but not quite perceived as such. We still deal with Donald Trump as if he was somehow an anomaly, or somehow a weird aberrant figure who appeared for rhesus. Journalists and pundits are still trying to figure out. But in fact, according to Melville's, you realize, no, this is an American type. He's been here from the beginning. Well, not quite the beginning. He's been here from the 17th century on. Wow. And the power and the skill set and the satanic presence that Trump has had in our lives over these years. It's, for me, it is one of the great, not only a beautifully written, great novel just to read it for its language, but it is one of the most profound novels of American political life that I've ever read.
Well, you'll notice I'm taking notes from both of you. What, on the flip side, what emerging author that you know about that you think that we ought to know about? I'm always on the lookout for new people. Russell, you're skipping just a little bit again.
I know you're much closer to the ground, as it were, than I am.
Ishmael, why don't you start with that one while Russell's technology catches up? Or do you have anybody that you want on our radar?
I go with two, actually. I go with two. One is Tiffany Midge, and she's a Lakota poet and humorist. And her latest book is Bury My Heart at Chuck E. Cheese's, which is a play on Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. You know, so
wow.
she's just terrific and a builder. You know, a literary builder, which those ones like that, like the Ishmael Reed example that Russell was talking about, you know, those are the ones I both for their talent, but also admiring those who bring people together, who call on people for panels, who write reviews, who try to get people jobs. I mean, those kinds of things really matter in the small writing community. And then the other one would be Tommy Pico, who is another native poet. And his poems, to me, just have a spark to them that just a type of radiation and uniqueness and originality in his lyric that, for me, I could just read his work all day. So.
Thank you, because particularly with poets, I always want them on my radar, because our largest events in the before times were poetry events. And so I always want to know about people that are coming out with new materials. Do you have a favorite author?
Me?
Yeah, you personally. And then Russell can ask that if he's still behind the scenes there.
Sure, I'd go with Homer. I'm classical. I'm very classical when it comes to this. I don't read too much contemporary work, actually. So Homer and Avdom Medvedevich, who I had spoken about a little bit earlier. There's only one English translation of his by Albert Lord and Milman Perry, The Wedding of Smiley Miho. And to me, he really was akin, like calling him the Bosnian Homer was appropriate because it was that good. It's as long, they tested it to see like to see if someone could compose an epic poem orally as long as the Iliad, for scientific reasons. But the talent was the same. It wasn't just the ability to sing a long poem. The talent was as good. And for someone who lived into the 1950s, I mean, that should be one of the most celebrated things in the world if we were more of a literary culture, but we're obviously not. So I go with those two.
You're singing my song. Russell, do you have a favorite author?
Well, I have so many that it's difficult to separate one out of others. I have to say that a writer who is perhaps among my near contemporaries has set a standard that I've tried hardest to reach is probably Toni Morrison. We were good friends for many years, and we were colleagues for many years at Princeton, and she was very close to me personally, and I to her, I hope, but her work above all mattered to me, and whenever she's the shadow that falls across my desk when I'm working. And I guess that is the way of measuring a favorite author. It's like, who sets your standards?
What a great visualization.
And I think that's I have to name her.
And so, Ishmael, you've told us what you're reading. Russell, what are you currently reading?
Well, I just finished this incredible long anthropological examination of human society. The Birth of Everything, which is a pretty telling title. But I'm also reading for the first time a book about which I knew a great deal, but had never read. And I think there are a lot of books like that. And this is Anna Karenina, Tolstoy's great novel. I never read it. Of course, I knew all about it. You don't get this far along in life without knowing something about it, and every references to it that I accumulated over the years, but I actually never sat down and read those 800 pages. And I'm near the end of it now. I'm reaching the end of it. I'm enthralled by it. I thought, wow, that was a good idea to wait, however, until I was a man in his 80s before I read this book. I don't think I really would have got it if I had read it earlier. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of books like that. I've been rereading. I spent the fall and winter last year rereading Faulkner, which I had read when I was young. But rereading books that you read when you were young, once you reach my age, is really an extraordinary and wonderful experience, because you have changed to such a degree that you're a completely new reader. And as a result, these are completely new books. They're completely new texts. They don't mean the same. They don't mean they mean so much more if they're great books, as these are. Than they meant when you were young and read them, when you didn't have much depth yourself.
Well, you each have given me a thirst for the classics, and I find myself pining for them now. So thank you. And I want to thank both of you. It's been an extraordinary evening. It really has. And I think you shared so much with us this evening, and I'm just going to leave it at that. And I regretfully have to sign you off.
Yeah, thank you.
So that I could say good evening. And thank you to Russell and Ishmael for participating in Write America this evening, and to everyone who tuned in tonight. And thank you particularly to Roger Rosenblatt for creating a very special series to look forward to each and every Monday night. And I will give you a note in the chat, because there is a special event, and Roger is being honored at the 75th anniversary of the Fulbright program, and it is a virtual event, so all of us can attend. And you can watch it live on November 30th at 7:30 p.m. I put the link right in the chat on your right-hand side, so you can come back anytime and snag it again if you don't get it tonight. But please don't miss that either, because I think it's going to be an incredibly special evening. Remember that Birds Books does have the books for these wonderful authors. Ishmael's is on the way. And I hope to see you next Monday for readings from Amy Hempel, Jim Shepard, and W. Todd Kaneko. Thank you so much for attending this evening. It's been very special to have you here. And please have a happy and safe Thanksgiving.